In 7.3, we're going to talk about how we can solve part-to-part ratios and proportions. And if you haven't done 7.2, if you haven't done the two-color chip activity with the yellow chips and the red chips, you probably ought to take a look at that now because that's what this warm-up deals with. So we're going to go through and we're going to talk about some of the ways that we figured out how we can determine, okay, how many yellow chips are there based on how many red chips are there, or based on how many there are in total, or something like that. So on this first one, on A, it says this is the ratio of yellow chips to red chips. So I'm going to put a Y here for yellow and an R here for red. And it says we don't know the number of yellow chips, this part right here. We do know the number of red chips, so the 15 part, and then we don't know the total number or the whole right here. So we've got part, and whole. So here's what we've got. We know this one's going to be 15 because that's the number of red ones here. We don't know that one. So there are a couple different things that we can do here. We could solve this as a proportion, or we can simply figure out, okay, we scaled this up by a certain number. If we started off with 5 and then we had 15, that means we multiplied by 3 here. So we're going to multiply by 3 here. So we're going to end up with 12. And then it's a simple addition problem to figure out how many we have in total. So we have 12 here, 15 here, so we have 27 altogether. And then it's also kind of a good idea to stop and think, well, if I did 4 plus 5, remember that whole thing where we added the numerator and denominator together? If I add those together, I get 9. So if I got 9 and I multiplied it by 3, I'd also end up with 27 over here. So that sum of the numerator and denominator can also be helpful. So on this one right here, this is the number of yellow ones. Okay, and this is how many we had in total. So that's going to be multiplying by 40. So we'd multiply this one by 40 to get the number here. So that's going to be 3 times 40. That's going to be 120. So our scale factor here is 40, whereas our scale factor on that one was only 3. So if we add those together, we end up with 200. Just for the heck of it, I want you to take a look at what we get here. If we add those together, 2 plus 3 is 5, and 5 times 40 would be the 200 over here. Now this one, we've got the total number, we've got the whole part, but we don't have either the yellow or the red part. So again, this is yellow, this is red, and if I total those up together to figure out what the whole is, the whole would be 20. Well, let's figure out what we'd have to multiply by to get 200. Well, if we multiplied that by 10, so there's our scale factor, let's see how that works out. Let's multiply this by 10, we end up with 130. If we multiply this by 10, we end up with 70. And lo and behold, 130 plus 70 does equal 200. So we're all set there. We've got that one taken care of. And we've got the scale factor. So the scale factor on this one was 10. So I'm going to put a box around this one. The scale factor on this one was 40. And the scale factor on this one was 3. So we're just going to keep those in mind because that's kind of how we're going to do today's assignment. We're going to spend 2 days talking about these part to whole proportions and ratios. Lots of good stuff here. Some really good information. So the stuff we had up above was presented in a table, and it can be a little bit more challenging if we've got a different situation where they describe what's going on with some numbers and some sentences and everything. Plus, if you did the two-color chip activity in 7.2, you already kind of familiarized yourself with the way that kind of works. So let's take a look at these problems down here, and on example 1 it says, please determine the scale factor, put a box around it like we did up above, show your work, and it says you may use tables to model your answer if it's helpful. So I'm going to circle if it's helpful, and we're going to solve most of these using equations. So I want you to read carefully and make sure that your answer makes sense, and it does answer each question. So here's what we've got. A recipe calls for 3 parts sugar to 7 parts water. If we know we need 15 parts sugar, how many parts do we need altogether to make the entire recipe? Keeping track of the whole may be helpful in many problems. In this problem, it will be helpful for us to know if we have a big enough bowl. Okay, so I've actually got a typo here. Okay, in this problem, it'll be helpful. It'll help us know whether or not we have a big enough bowl. So let's keep track of what we've got here. We have the sugar here, and we have the other thing is water. Okay, so it's 3 parts of sugar to 7 parts of water. And let's keep track of what the whole would be. That would mean it would add up. We'd have 10 parts altogether. And then it says if we know we need 15 parts sugar, so 15 parts sugar. So this is going to be 15. And then it says how many parts do we need altogether? So we need to know this guy right here. So let's go ahead and solve this proportion, because this isn't really an equation right here. This is just kind of something that we can keep track of here. So I'm going to go ahead and solve this using our cross multiplying methods. So we're going to multiply here and we're going to multiply here. That's going to give me 3x on this side, 7 times 15 on this side. We're going to divide by 3, so we end up with x is equal to, well, let's see what happens here. I can cross cancel here. That's going to be a 5, so I end up with 35. So that x right there is 35, so that means I need 50 parts altogether. Okay, so it says how many parts do we need all together to figure that out? So that's going to be 50. So here's the answer to the problem. We need 50 parts altogether. That'll help us figure out whether or not we've got a big enough bowl to fit everything. And then it does say we want to figure out what the scale factor is. So let's come back and let's figure that out. The scale factor is what we'd multiply the old top to get the new top. So if I were to multiply here, I'd multiply by 5. 3 times 5 is 15. Does that work out right here? 7 times 5 is 35. And does it work out on this one? 10 times 5 is 50, so it works just fine. So we're going to put the scale factor in a box. So we're going to put that right there. Now, there's a chart that we've set up here, and you can do that on some of these. I don't find this really useful, and I'll show you why. So the way to work on a chart like this, I find it much easier to just solve this going through and solving equations and using scale factors. The way to do this would be to write down 3 parts of sugar and then 7 parts of water and then 10 parts altogether. And then just kind of step up, kind of double the recipe and triple the recipe. So we're going to count by 3 up here. So this is going to be 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, and so forth. And then this one right here is going to be 14 and 21 and 28 and 35, and this would be 42. And then again, if we kind of use this as a double check, let's count by 10, this would be 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. Next one would be 70 and so forth. 3 plus 7 is 10, 6 plus 14 is 20, 9 plus 21 is 30, and so forth. So it does work. And what we'd be looking for is we'd be looking for the one where we get to 15. So we really didn't need to do any further than this. This is our answer right here. And you'll notice that column right here, 15, 35, and 50, 15, 35, and 50 works out to be that one right there. And you can also kind of tell what the scale factor would be. This is the first one, second one, third one, fourth one, fifth one. So we would times by 5 to get right there. And that's one way to figure that out. This one's a fairly easy one with small numbers, so it's not too bad. So again, the answers that you want to look for here is you want to make sure that you find the scale factor. You want to put a box around it, and then you also want to make sure that you answer the question. Okay, the answer to this question was, it said how many parts do we need altogether? So pretend these were cups or something like that. This would be 3 cups of sugar, 7 cups of water, and then 10 cups altogether. If we were going to make this type of batch, this would be 15 cups of sugar, 35 cups of water, so 50 cups altogether. All right, let's take a look at this next problem, and I'll show you why I really don't like this other method over here. So Troy won first place and John won second place in the spelling contest. They shared a cash prize in the ratio of 8 to 5. So Troy and John. So let's put Troy here, and let's put John here. And his ratio is 8 to 5. Okay, so he definitely won more. Okay, and then the whole part right here is going to be 13. Let's combine those together. And it says if John received $65, how much did Troy receive? And then it says you may not always need to keep track of the whole, but it's kind of a good thing to be aware of. It's definitely going to be helpful when we work on these some different problems and the stuff that we're going to do in the next section. So it says John received $65, so he got $65. Well, let's solve this one a little bit differently. How would we go from 5 to 65? Now, 65 divided by 5 is 13, so I think the scale factor on this one, and I'm going to put this in blue, the scale factor on this one is 13. So if we multiply by 13, let's see what we get there. I'll grab the calculator on this one. We're going to do the 8 times 13. Now, what would be awesome is if you knew what this was ahead of time. So 8 times 10 would be 80, and 8 times 3 is 24, so that's going to be 104, I think. Yep, so we get 104. So this number right here is 104, so I'm going to go ahead and replace that, 104. Now, we got that by multiplying by 13, so we multiply both sides by 13. If we wanted to use this as a double check, this would be kind of cool. Let's multiply that by 13. So if we grab our calculator and let's do 13 times 13, we end up with 169. So 169. Now, it didn't ask for that. What it said is, how much did Troy receive? Troy received this much right here. So Troy received $104. Now, as a double check, let's just check and see. If we took 104 and added 65, would we get 169? We would, so that kind of verifies using one more number that we did get this right. So Troy received $104. Okay, now the reason I really don't like this method right here is if we were to go through and do this problem that way, we'd have to start off with 8 to 5, and then we would count by fives until we got to 65. So this would be 10 and 15 all the way up to 65, and then we'd have to count by 8. So this would be 16, then 24, then 32. We'd have to find the one that matches up there. We end up going a long way, and again this would be 104, but we have to put, let's see, remember how I told you could figure out what the scale factor is? You have to do 13 boxes. Okay, you'd have to fill up 13 boxes, and that's the scale factor in order to figure out what those numbers are. So it would be a really long table, a really long chart like that, kind of a pain in the butt. So let's come down here and let's take a look at these next problems, and let's just quickly figure these out. It says Ed and Diana collected 85 bugs. Now, we could throw another word in here. They collected 85 bugs altogether. For every 5 bugs Ed collected, Diana collected 12. How many more did Diana collect than Ed? So the question here is not about how many either one of them collected. It's a question about how many more did Diana collect than Ed. So let's do this. For every 5 bugs, Ed and Diana, Ed collected 5, Diana collected 12. And then because we've got to do the whole part all together, the whole would be 17. And it says they collected 85. No, here's the cool part about this. We know that together they collected 85. So let's figure out what the scale factor is based off that. Let's do 85 divided by 17. So 85 divided by 17. So what we're figuring out is, what do you multiply these numbers by, these smaller simplified numbers by, in order to get these unsimplified or these larger numbers? So we multiply by 5. So let's check and see what we get here. If we multiply by 5 here, we'd end up with 60. And if we multiply by 5 here, we end up with 25. So let me just back off here for a second. 5 times 5 is 25. 12 times 5 is 60. These would be in the same ratio, and take a look. These add up to 17, but these add up to 85. So it says Ed and Diana collected 85 bugs. This is what they collected, so we're in good shape. Ed collected 25 and Diana collected 60. And then it says, how many more did Diana collect than Ed? So Diana minus Ed, that's going to be 60 minus 25, so we're going to end up with 35. Okay, so we could say she collected 35 more than Ed, and we could circle that. Okay, now the scale factor on this one, again, we want to make sure that we note what that is. The scale factor on this one is 5, so I'm going to put a box around that. And again, if we wanted to go through and write down what we've got here, this would be 5 and 12 and 17 for the whole, adding those together, and we'd have to count by 17, so that would be 34 and then 51. And let's see, the next one would be 68 and then 85. So notice 1, 2, 3, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5 boxes. So there's our scale factor of 5, and then we'd multiply by 5, that would be 25, and multiply by 5, and that would be 60. Again, kind of a pain. I really like this other method better. Okay, so let's take a look at the last one here. And this one's got an asterisk by it, so we might want to be careful on this one. It says, for every 2 raffle tickets Derek sells, Rachel sells 7. If Rachel sold 49 tickets, how many did they sell altogether? Okay, so let's take a look here. For every 2 Derek sells, Rachel sells 7. So let's do Derek and Rachel. We'll label those. He sells 2 and she sells 7. Okay. And then it says she sold 49. So we know that she sold 49. What we don't know is this number right here, but we can figure that out using the scale factor. And then it says how many did they sell altogether. Well, there are 2 ways to figure that out. So here's the whole part. So this would be a 9. And then let's figure out what the scale factor is. To go from 7 to 49, again, we could do a little division problem, or that's in our multiplication table. So we're going to multiply by 7. So this is going to end up being a 14. Okay, and the scale factor, again, I'm going to write that in blue. The scale factor is 7, so we're going to multiply each one of these numbers by 7. So if I multiply 9 by 7, 9 times 7 is 63. It says how many did they sell altogether? So 63 would be the answer. So sold 63 all together. All right, so there's the answer to that one. And again, just as a double check, 14 plus 49 is 63. So we know we got it right. So as you're going through and doing these, make sure that you write down each one of the parts and the whole, even if we don't use that every single time. Like we didn't use it here, but we definitely found the whole one right there. That was the question, is how many did they sell altogether. All right, good luck on the assignment.